Speaking Questions 2021 for Part 2 and 3. In this video I'm going to introduce the new questions for 2021 to you. I have organized these topics under the 5 themes of people, places, things, activities, and experiences. I have other videos that help you deal with questions under these themes, and there is a link to these in the description. The purpose of this video is to just tell you what the questions are, so that you can prepare answers for them, and also be aware of what the questions are, so that you don't get a nasty surprise in your test.
Questions about people. Describe a polite person you know. You should say who the person is, how you know this person, what this person is like, and explain why you think he or she is polite. Part 3. How important is it to be polite in your culture? What are some ways people show that they are polite in your culture? Do you feel that people from cities are more polite than those from the countryside? What do you think can make people more polite?
Describe an energetic person that you know. You should say who this person is, how you know this person, why you think this person is energetic, and explain how you feel about this person. Part 3. What kinds of jobs need a lot of physical work? Should jobs that require physical work be higher paid? Will physical workers receive higher salaries in the future? Do you think machines could replace all human workers in the future?
Describe an old friend that you got in contact with again. You should say who he or she is, what he or she is like, how you got in contact, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. What are some of the different ways friends are often reunited? In what ways are social media useful for reuniting people? Do people in your country like to keep in touch with their childhood friends? What factors make it difficult to keep in touch with friends?
Describe a person you know shows her feelings openly. You should say who this person is, how you knew this person, why you think this person is open, and explain how you feel about this person. Part 3. Do people in your country usually show their feelings? Do children show their feelings more than adults? What are some reasons why people might hide their feelings? Do you think people these days show their feelings more than they did in the past?
Places. Describe a special hotel you have stayed in. You should say where it is, what it is like, why you went there, and how you felt about it. Part 3. What are some of the reasons why people stay in hotels? What can influence people's choices of hotels? To what extent do the ratings of hotels influence people's choices? What's the difference between the hotels in your country and those abroad?
Describe something you bought that you felt satisfied with. You should say what you bought, where you bought it, what it is for, and explain why you felt satisfied with it. Part 3. How often do people in your country go shopping? Why is online shopping popular? What are the drawbacks with online shopping? Do you think online shopping will ever totally replace shopping in stores?
Describe a time when you got close to wild animals. You should say where it was, what the animals were doing, who you were with, and describe your feeling when seeing the wild animals. Part 3. What wild animals are common in your country? Are zoos popular in your country? What are some of the reasons why people keep pets? What dangers do wild animals face in your country?
Describe a toy you liked in your childhood. You should say what kind of toy it is, when you received it, how you played with it, and how you felt about it. Part 3. How do advertisements influence children? Show show it advertising aimed at children be prohibited? What's the difference between toys nowadays and those in the past? Do you think children these days have too many toys?
Describe an art exhibition you have seen. You should say when you went there, where it was, what it was like, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. Why do some people like to collect art? Why is some artwork expensive? Do you think artwork is a good investment? What problems might there be with collecting art?
Describe a piece of international news you recently heard. You should say what it was about, where and when you heard it, what you were doing when you heard it, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. How do people in your country usually get news? Which kind of news is more popular, domestic news or international news? Do you think children should learn about the news at school? How is the news media changing recently?
Describe a prize that you received. You should say what it was, when you received it, what you did for it, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. What kind of prizes do students get in your country? What are the benefits of giving people prizes? What are the best ways for companies to reward employees? Are there any kinds of drawbacks of giving prizes or rewards to people? Questions about activities.
Describe a time when you gave advice to someone. You should say when it was, who you gave the advice, what the advice was, and explain why you gave the advice. Part 3. What types of advice do young people often need? Is it good to ask for advice from strangers online? What jobs often involve giving advice to others? What are the problems might occur if you ask too many people for advice?
Describe an unforgettable bicycle trip you went on. You should say when it was, where you went, who you were with, and explain why you think it was unforgettable. Part 3. Do you think cycling is a good way to get exercise? Should children learn how to ride a bicycle at school? Do people in your country often travel by bike? Do you think cycling will be more popular in the future?
Describe a short trip you often take but do not like. You should say where you go, when you go there, why you go there, and explain why you do not like about the trip. Part 3. Do people in your country like traveling abroad? Do older and younger people have different preferences about traveling abroad? How much time do you think people should spend on a trip abroad? Are gap years abroad popular for school leavers in your country?
Describe a time you made a promise to someone. You should say what the promise was, who you make a promise to, whether you kept the promise, and explain why you made it. Part 3. What kinds of promises do people often make? How important to keep promises? Why do people often fail to keep their promises? Do you think people will be more trustworthy in the future?
Describe a skill that you think you can teach other people. You should say what it is, when you learned it, how you can teach others, and explain why people need this skill. Part 3. What qualities should teachers have? Is it helpful if teachers use humor when they teach? Which do you think is more important to teach, practical skills or academic skills? Which age group is the best at learning new things?
Describe a time when you told your friend an important truth. You should say who your friend is, what the truth was, what your friend's reaction was, and explain why you think it was important to tell your friend the truth. Part 3. In what situations is it important to tell the truth? Are there any situations that justify not telling the truth? What are some ways to tell when someone is not telling the truth? What occupations might involve sometimes not telling the truth?
Describe a live sport match that you watched. You should say what it was, when you watched it, what it was like, and how you felt about it. Do you prefer to watch sports live or on TV? Why do some people like to watch live sports? What kinds of sports do people in your country like to watch most? Do you think sports competitions are good for students?
Describe the time when you first talked in a foreign language. You should say where you were, who you were with, what you talked about, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. At what age should children start learning a foreign language? Which skill is more important, speaking or writing? Does a person still need to learn other languages, if he or she is good at English? Do you think minority languages will disappear?
Describe a time when you saw children behave badly in public. You should say where it was, what the children were doing, how others reacted to it, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. What kinds of bad behavior do children usually have? How should parents stop their children from behaving badly in public? Are parents these days stricter than those in the past? Whose influence on children is more important, friends or parents?
Questions about experiences. Describe a time when you ate something for the first time. You should say what you ate, when you ate it, where you ate it, and how you felt about it. Part 3. What kind of foreign food is popular in your country? Do young people eat different kinds of food than old people? Should teachers and parents teach children how to cook? Why do people often prefer their local food to foreign food?
You should say when it was, where you were, what happened, and explain how you felt during that day. Part 3. Do you think most people enjoy the first day of school? What are some common challenges that people face when starting school? What are some ways to reduce these challenges? Do you think students should be taken to school by their parents or go by themselves?
Describe a time you needed to use your imagination. You should say when it was, why you needed to use imagination, how difficult or easy it was, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. What school subjects are helpful for developing children's imagination? Do you think reading novels helps develop children's imagination? Do children have better imaginations than adults? What kinds of jobs need imagination?
Describe a time when you changed your opinion. You should say when it was, what the original opinion was, why you changed it, and explain how you felt about it. Part 3. Why do people often have differing opinions? What might cause people to change their opinion? Do you think people's opinions change as they get older? Do you think people in the future will hold different opinions than now?
Describe a short-term job you want to have in a foreign country. You should say what the job is, where you want to do it, how you knew it, and explain why you want to do it. Part 3. What kind of work can young people do in foreign countries? Is it good for young people to have the experience of living in other countries? Why are some people unwilling to work in other countries? Do you think more people will work abroad in the future?
Describe a conversation topic that you were not interested in. You should say who you talked with, when you had the conversation, what the topic was, and explain why you were not interested. Part 3. What topics do young people in your country like to talk about? What's the difference between the topics now and those in the past? What sort of topics should not be discussed with strangers? What's the influence of modern technology on our communication?
Describe a time when you received good news. You should say what the news was, who told you the news, when you knew it, and how you felt about it. Part 3. Where do people get the news in your country? What kind of news do people like to read? Is the news on social media reliable? Should children learn about the news at school?
Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, make sure you've liked it, and even better, subscribe to me so that you'll get my upcoming videos about part 2 questions, part 3 questions, and also some skills and strategies for taking the IELTS speaking test.